Now, let's think a bit more deeply about the concept of work. I mean, we're not trying to make a fuss about this, but there are indeed something more important about this concept. I mean, thankfully, most people understand the necessity of work, right? This is not a terribly difficult concept. However, in the traditional Chinese culture, there is equal emphasis on the purpose of work. That is slightly different. I mean, surely improving private economic life is included in the purpose of work, but the purpose of work involves a lot more than that. For example, in the Infinite Life Sutra, the Buddha gave a very precise description of the people of the world. He said, they work constantly to make a living in order to support themselves. Okay, working hard, single-mindedly manage their own business for the purpose of supplying and nourishing themselves. Well, in this part of the sutra, the Buddha describes the pain and the suffering of the people. In general, he revealed that, no matter who you are, everybody worries about their wealth and property, with no time for peace and rest. This is very true if we think about this for a brief moment. The poor surely have to worry about their bottom line and, need to find ways to feed themselves and their family, put a roof over their head and raise their families. So it is natural for them to envy the rich and think that, life would have been so much easier if they were wealthier. However, for the rich, there are only more to worry about. The rich would have to safeguard their wealth, make sure that their immense wealth is productive and generate returns and not just sitting there doing nothing. They also need to consider very hard how to allocate wealth among beneficiaries, such as family members and different stakeholders. On the top of that, if the rich person ever want to have a break from their busy life, he may simply find it difficult to do so because of all the responsibilities and obligations. So the Buddha reveals that all the pains and worries of life partially come from our endless desire. In the Dharma lecture, the Venerable Master Ching Kong illustrates the emergence of human desire using an example of a newborn baby. I think that is a fantastic example. He said, during the first 100 days, the little baby shows true happiness towards all the things and all the people around him or her. They don't distinguish between their parents and other people. And if you come around and look at them, they just smile. They smile to you, whoever you are. So the love to people is equal and natural. But because of human habit, the baby gradually starts to distinguish between parents and others. And as he, comes to contact with the material world, he would establish desires and wants. So the wanting of things is also accompanied by the pain of not getting it, not being able to get it. And the happiness generated from getting of things is also very short-lived. And we have discussed that before already. And the happiness also is quickly replaced by, further desire. So the cycle continues. Now, because the process of getting of things is usually not a very smooth one, sometimes accompanied by struggling, jealousy, and other inappropriate actions. So all of these add to the accumulation of pains. So this is not to say that we shouldn't work, but quite the contrary, we have to work, right? At least the majority of the people have to work for a living. So the question that we ask is that how much is enough? During our earlier lectures on consumption, we said that apart from satisfying basic survival need, the ultimate purpose of consumption is achieving happiness. We have established that already. This is also the final purpose of work, isn't it? We work so that we receive financial reward, and financial reward allows us to acquire resources in order to satisfy our material desire. Apart from financial reward, we also want social status and respect, and so on. So again, we work so that we can acquire higher status and recognition in order to satisfy our mental desire. So in logic, work is the only channel through which we obtain our desired happiness. The problem with human beings is that most of the time we simply forget why we work. We forget. And instead of staying satisfied with what we have, we move on to a higher target. Don't we? So the channel towards happiness has become our final destination. It's very similar to what we said before. We said consumption is the channel to happiness, but somewhere along the way, consumption becomes the final destination. We forget why we consume in the first place. Okay, so we end up being stuck on the journey of satisfying our desire, but never reaching that destination. So the immediate question is that how do we maintain our happiness? If we can't maintain our happiness, we simply cannot be happy, and we end up in the conundrum of living to work, not working to live, right? So let's pause for a moment. And think about a particular happy person in history, and I have mentioned him a couple of times. That is Shakyamuni Buddha. But there are other sages as well in other cultures and other parts of human history. But let me just use one example only in this case because of time constraint. Okay. Shakyamuni Buddha had a very fulfilled and happy life. But his happiness was not based on material satisfaction. Like I said before, Shakyamuni Buddha used to be a prince in India, but after observing, the pain of life itself, he decided to abandon his wealth and power and searched for the ways to be free from all pains. After achieving enlightenment, Shakyamuni Buddha spent the rest of his life as a teacher. Now, as recorded in the sutra, he rested under the tree during the night and had only one meal a day. So this was the life that Shakyamuni Buddha chose to live. And yet he was the happiest person of all. And more importantly, although he is, perceived as the founder of Buddhism, he essentially worked as an educator. And his job was to reveal the truth of the universe to the people and help them to be free from pain of life through different kinds of practice and teaching. So here's a question. How can somebody work so hard, enjoy so little material offerings, and yet so happy? Well, let's think about this from the perspective of work, shall we? The majority of the people, quite naturally work for themselves. And this, there's nothing to do with the notion of self-employment, okay? But it means that people work in order to fulfill their own material wants. As long as we don't put a cap on our desire, you can see that there is simply no way that work can satisfy our need, right? Because, desire is endless. You always want more. So for someone like Shakyamuni Buddha, work is not for the self, but for all the beings in the universe, whether in this realm or not. Likewise, in ancient China, this someone was Confucius. He worked extremely hard as well, but he never lost happiness. He didn't work for himself, but for the well-being of all mankind under heaven, in his language. So his happiness was, no matched by those kings and noble families who studied from him. Confucius worked constantly, but not for the purpose of making a living to support himself, but to nourish all the people through education. So in traditional Chinese philosophy, the purpose of work has a special place in career development, and that has a direct impact on happiness. More specifically, when a person works entirely for supporting himself, it's very likely that he will run into a problem of never-ending desire. When a person lets his desire grow freely without check, work becomes a source of pain and suffering. It's not a channel anymore, but rather a channel to suffering, right? So happiness in this case becomes very difficult to achieve or very short-lived. But if one works with the goal of fulfilling the life of people other than themselves, then there is happiness. And that, the life of people can be whoever, for the family, work for the family, or community, or one's country, or the entire humanity. The happiness coming from serving the rest of the fellow human beings are not restricted by material consumption, but simply from a sense of mission. Okay? Now, when you serve others, when you're serving other people, the focus on your own consumption and well-being is naturally reduced. You don't think about that too much. So it is easier for one to feel satisfied and consequently happy. Now, if we extend our horizon, okay, and look at the issue of work in the long term, working for others is actually no different than working for oneself, because as we have mentioned in the very beginning of this course, according to traditional Chinese culture, economics and ethics are just two sides of the same coin. I think that was lecture 2. Okay, when everyone works only for themselves, the necessary outcome will be conflict and struggle, and that will definitely hurt individual rights and well-being that we pursue in the first place. This is an obvious issue. An example, this is an obvious issue if we take the example of a family. Okay, as long as we live in a family, family harmony is the foundation for a happy personal life. Everybody contributes to the family and cares for the well-being of other family members. This also applies to the community, to the country, and the entire human race. For example, when the benefit of one country is based on the sacrifice of another country, well, sooner or later, the former will feel the negative impact from the later in terms of retaliation or non-cooperation in important matters, both economic and political. So all of these will happen in a medium to long term. And any economic policy that ignores this is nothing more than stupidity. But the reason that we tend to consider only our own benefit is that we are naturally both short-sighted and narrow-minded. The cure to this problem is therefore education of ethics. In traditional culture, ethics is not something artificial or man-made. It is simply the manifestation of the natural order. The nature is always in harmony until human beings interfere and disrupt the balance. In human society, the natural order is manifested into the 5 human relation, which is the relation between the parents and children, between husband and wife, between superior and subordinate, between siblings, or let's say junior and senior, and and between friends. Okay. Now, each of these 5 relations are governed by a set of natural rules. So when the rules are broken, the society will eventually fall into chaos, and the loss of personal benefit and happiness is the necessary outcome. You will find a brief description of the 5 human relation on this website as well. Okay. So, in conclusion, the ancient sages emphasize a lot on the teaching of the 5 human relation, and we can say that from an economics perspective, the ethical teaching is the only method to restore human prosperity in the medium to long term. So our starting point is to reconsider the very purpose of our work. Why do we work? And gradually shift our focus from working for ourselves only towards the rest of our community and the entire human race. Now, as we become more open-minded, we'll be able to extract more happiness from work.